Hello and welcome to today's episode of the Work at Home Rockstar podcast. Very excited for today's guest. He's a computer hacker turned people hacker, and he's an international breakthrough specialist. And what he does is he helps people to create big shifts in their reality by addressing mental and emotional states. Excited to be rocking out today with Nick Breau. Hey, Nick, are you ready to rock?
Let's rock.
Great. We always start off here on a good note. So tell me a story of success in your business that we can be inspired by.
Yeah, I mean, as I mentioned to you before the podcast, for me, being a mindset expert, mindset coach, the notion of success and failure kind of is maybe blurred is the right way to say it. One particular story of success that comes to mind was back in my tech days. So before I do the work that I do now, which is the mindset work, I spent 10 years in startups. And the last startup was a company out of Fredericton called Radiant 6, a big success. We were acquired for $330 million US by Salesforce, a company in the States, which got a lot of press. So anyways, I remember at one point, maybe a year and a half, maybe a year before the acquisition, I remember sitting in my cubicle, kind of looking around the office and thinking to myself, people aren't really that happy. Most people aren't depressed, but people aren't really coming into work every morning, smiles on the faces, loving life. And it got me thinking, I was working 40, 50, sometimes 60 hours a week. I felt like I was almost stuck in this cubicle feeling jail cell where I only had a couple of weeks vacation every year to spend with my kids, very little time to do what I wanted to do. And, I'm sure a lot of people kind of feel that same way. And I noticed this kind of feeling growing inside of me, almost this feeling that like life is supposed to be easier than this, that this isn't what life is about. And when I give talks, when I ask the audience, how many people here can feel that feeling? Put your hand up. And most people do feel this feeling that, life is supposed to be easier than this. And at that point in my life, I'd already started studying a little bit about spirituality, personal development, self-help. But that's when I really started to dive in. And I really started focusing on feeling good, on happiness, on connecting to inner guidance. And life, that was like the turning point in my life. If I had to identify one massive turning point in my life, it would have been that moment. Because from that point onwards, that's when life really started to change. Within the next year and a half, the acquisition happened, which gave me financial freedom. I stepped away from the tech world to focus on personal development and self-help. I ended up leaving my marriage. I met my current partner. So my name is Nick. Her name is Anik. So we both have very similar names. When we met, we were both studying the same type of work. We were both driving the same type of car. And a number of months after we started dating, we even found out that we had both left our marriages on the exact same day before we'd ever met. So when we talk about, big success, for me, the way if I look at my entire life and come up with, what was my big success? Sure, the acquisition was great. And sure, the success of my current practice is great too. But really the success for me was breaking out of this mold of society, this rat race that we all get stuck in, or we're all convinced that we're stuck in, to a place where now I'm living a life that really feels like freedom that I think a lot of people are looking for. And it's really one of the main drivers in my own coaching business is helping people discover, how powerful they really are and how amazing their life can be if they look in the right direction.
Yeah. Wow. What a great story. I have a similar story because my background is in tech as well, sitting in a cubicle and just not, I would have put my hand up at that seminar, that's for sure. But it is interesting that I actually, my way out was through multi-level marketing. Actually, I started getting invited to these meetings where appeared to me that people at this pyramid scheme seemed way more happy than I was in my cubicle when supposedly, I was, doing what I was supposed to do. I had that, great high tech job, climbing the ladder. And these people were way more happy than I was. And I'm thinking, okay, I want whatever that Kool-Aid is. so, so I started looking down that, but it really did start with that, just starting to ask questions about what makes you happy, right?
Yeah, and I know we're going to talk about failures as well, but really, if I get onto the topic of what I think my biggest failure might have been in the last 47 years of my life, it was, being another one of those sheep, following the crowd, doing what I was told I needed to do if I wanted to be happy, and eventually realizing no, that sure, there's a cookie pattern to society of what you need to do to be happy, but that cookie cutter mold may have been the mold that worked for people in the 70s or maybe the 80s, but things are very different than they were back then. And if you want to be happy, you've got to go within and you got to figure out what works for you, right?
Yeah. And I think that's really it. I think that back in this, probably even 60s and 70s, the path was very structured, and you really could, and I know that you really could just follow this script and you were gonna probably be doing okay. But I remember when my dad got laid off from his job 35 years to the day, it kind of made me kind of go, okay, whoa, this is the path that I'm heading on, of like climbing the ladder, and this is definitely not what they said it was going to be, right? But now, yeah, you mentioned the bad notes. I call them bad notes because in all of my analogies are with music, and every once in a while, you are going to hit a bad note, and I want to mainly ask the question because of just to normalize it a bit and make sure that people understand that it's not the end of the world. Things are going to go wrong. And, how do you handle, a bad note? And if you have one, you can share it. But how do you handle when things don't go as planned?
Yeah, and I wouldn't even call it a bad note. What I would call it is new awareness, right? So for me in my business, one of the quotes that I like to use is that if you're not giving yourself an opportunity to fail, then you're not giving yourself an opportunity to succeed. Because it's in those failures that we learn what we're doing wrong, and we learn what we need to pivot, and we learn what we need to shift. So really, even I'd go as far as saying that there would be no purpose to life if those failures didn't exist, because there would be no growth.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. And I'm just thinking to myself now, because I've accepted a new challenge in my music career where now I've got an opportunity to play some lead guitar for a band. And I've never played lead before. And I'll tell you, Nick, it is mind-blowing that I've been performing for 20 some odd years. However, I still have almost quit. Like, I don't know how, before I even got on stage, I haven't even done a gig yet with these guys. However, I can just map it out in my head. I can just see myself, hitting the wrong note and then like being all upset. But how many times have I hit the wrong note in the past already? And here I'm still here, right?
Yeah, and it's amazing, for the business owners or the entrepreneurs on the call. A lot of people do not realize how much this fear of failure or the fear of making a mistake is impacting their business. Because when you've got a fear going on like that, there's hesitance, right? And when there's hesitance, even if you force yourself through that hesitance, there's still like a dampening of your energy. There's still an aspect of holding yourself back. So like, think of how differently when somebody walks on stage, maybe to give a talk, how different their energy is, how different their state of being is when they walk on stage drenched in that fear and that resistance and that hesitation, versus somebody who comes up and just doesn't even give a shit and just blurts out whatever they want to blurt out, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Business success is such an energetic thing. And that's why mindset is so important. And a lot of people understand, oh yeah, mindset is important in your business and mindset is important in your success. But a lot of people don't really invest in their mindset because they don't understand how mindset directly correlates to the success and how it leads to what you're putting out, what you get back.
Yeah, well, you mentioned hesitancy. I played a lot of hockey growing up, and I remember when we were learning how to hit and how to take a hit. And the main thing is do not hesitate. If you hesitate, that's when you get hurt. And I remember taking that into business and thinking that there's a lot of truth in real life. When you hesitate, that's when things go really wrong, right?
Yeah, and when you're fearless, when you don't care if you fail or not. So a lot of what I teach is, any action step that I take in my business, I take that action step because it feels fun. It feels exciting. I take the action step for the action itself, not for the potential outcome. And when you do things from that energy where you're just doing it to do it, then you take that fear element, out because you fail, who cares? I fail, big deal, right? Another expansion point, another point of growth. And then you just roll with it. You learn what you need to learn from it, and then you move on to the next thing.
That's right. That's right. So now what about getting fans? What about, you've done many speeches, I imagine, and you've got to get people in the seats. How do you manage to do that?
So, and social media comes to mind, especially here in this notion of growing a platform and getting fans. The key word that absolutely comes to mind is authenticity. So if I look at the coaching world, again, I hate this word, but it's getting to be very cookie cutter. You see a lot of people are rehashing the same thing. One person says something, and then you've got 10,000 other people saying the same thing, right? So then you got to wonder, well, why do some people's Instagrams take off and they're saying the same stuff as 1,000 other people who aren't taking off? What's the difference? And the difference comes down to the energy that person is putting out. And at the foundation of the energy that they're putting out is authenticity, right? There is nothing more important in your business, regardless of what kind of business you have, in being authentic, because people they feel, whether they realize it or not, they're reading your energy. They can feel. It's not only about the words coming out of your mouth and the processing that they're doing of those words coming out of your mouth, but it's about the feeling you're getting from that person. When I sign up to work under a coach, I know within seconds whether I'm going to sign up with them. I don't need to hear the sales pitch. I don't need to hear what they're talking about. I've already watched some of their videos. I already know what they do. It's a very much a vibrational, energetic match that's guided kind of from a feeling place. And relationships, it's the same thing, right? When you're connected with somebody with a really, really deep connection, it's more just than the intellectual or the looks. It's really a deep, energetic sense and connection and a place that feels almost like home.
And, back to the initial part about making mistakes, and that goes hand in hand. Because if you are totally rehearsed in what you're about to say, and I mean, I'm sure anybody who's given some sort of speech knows this. I mean, the more you practice that speech, the worse it gets, the more robotic it gets, and the less likely you are to even make that sale if that's a sales speech, right?
One of my favorite topics to talk about is something I call de-intellectualization. So what happens is, our intuition is our superpower. It's our strongest decision maker. And in Radiant 6, it was clear that the top decision makers, they would go with their intuition above their intellect. And we all have this strong intuitive power, but what happens is we allow our intellect to doubt it, to get in the way of it. And, if you look at animals, for example, up here, we've got Canada geese who migrate south in the wintertime. Canada geese, they don't pull an iPhone out of their pocket and say, oh yeah, my calendar says it's time to go south today, right? Or they don't pull out Google Maps to say, okay, this is the direction I have to fly in. They have just an inner nudge, an inner knowing that's always guiding them of what to do and where to go. And as humans, we have the exact same thing and the exact same ability, but we allow our intellect to interfere with that and interfere with our ability to feel out, is this person the right person for me?
Yeah, I think that's why extreme sports are so popular, because they take out the entire thinking process. You're just living,
Yeah.
right?
Or even like the top athletes in their sports, like hockey players. So like I'm sure the top 10 scorers in the NHL aren't any athletically superior than most of the other players in the league. My guess is they have a higher sense of intuition where they can feel out where to be on the ice when they need to be.
You know what? I'm remembering now. When I was playing sports, I used to always say that I work better under pressure, and I do, and even in work, I've always worked better under pressure, and I'm starting to think about why that is now, because when you're under pressure, when you're on that deadline and you've got to get it done, you're not thinking. I think that when you've got too much time on your hands, all of a sudden you start to overthink everything, right?
Absolutely.
So,
Absolutely.
so is there a way to, because I think that the opposite of that would be missing deadlines and making mistakes. What would be the happy medium between putting enough pressure on you that you don't have to think versus being prepared?
I think that's a really good question. I think when it comes to pressure, I think different people handle pressure in different ways. But you said it perfectly when you said, for you, when you're under pressure, you get out of your head. And really, that's the key, right? Some people, when they're under pressure, maybe they start to think too much and get into their head too much, right?
Right.
So for me, in my business and something I teach is that it's not so much the decisions you make, but it's the energy that you're practicing when you make those decisions. So let's say you're an entrepreneur and there's 5 potential business ideas that you could choose. If you're practicing the energetics of failure, so earlier we talked about fear of failure. So if you're sitting in an energy of doubt and failure and not good enough, and you're really practicing this vibration of failure, doesn't matter which one of those 5 business ideas you choose, the end result's going to be failure. And if you come into these same 5 business ideas with the energy of confidence, of focus, of being out of your head, of success, doesn't matter which one of those you're going to choose, the end result's going to be success, right?
Right on.
So again, it all comes down to getting out of your head, tuning into your inner guidance, your intuition. Me manifesting this 7-figure acquisition and the story about Anik and I, these things and these types of synchronicities, my belief is that these are supposed to be the norm, right? That these aren't supposed to be incredible, miraculous things that happen once in a lifetime. I've got lots of different types of stories of synchronicities. I think that when we get out of our head enough and de-intellectualize enough and spend more time in our bodies, that's what harnesses some of these experiences, because our intuition becomes so much stronger to a point where we're listening to our intuition. We don't even know it. Sometimes we're walking down the street, you get this inner nudge to go into a bookstore next to you, and you walk in, your mind doesn't even have a chance to register the fact that you got that nudge, right?
Yep. Yeah. So I think a lot of it, what you're saying, is more just understanding how you work. If you're the type of person that gets in their head when they're under pressure, then don't do that. But if you're the type of person that gets out of your head when you're under pressure, then do that, right?
Yeah. And different people have different abilities when it comes to getting out of their head. So for some people, getting out of your head feels like it's next to impossible, right? And that's where meditation comes in. That's where grounding visualizations come in. I've got tons of resources. I've got a program specifically designed, I call it quantum calibration. It's like the 4 key things that everybody needs to be doing to kind of foster more of that inner connection. And one of those 4 things is learning to ground yourself and be in your body rather than being up here all the time in your head.
Yeah. I think we live in a golden age of resources where there is resources for anything, any type of personality, if you look for it, if you're open to it, right?
Absolutely.
So now what about keeping the hat full? Because, once you get those fans, you've got to figure out a way to make a living out of that, right? So what's your approach on, making that exchange?
So, I mean, it all comes down to doing what feels good. So in my experience, when I'm putting out programs, when I'm launching coaching groups, when I'm working with people or anything that involves money, whenever I've launched something because my belief was, ooh, this is a good moneymaker, it just did okay at best. When I launched something that I was launching for the excitement of it, that's when the signups came in, right? So again, I would say if somebody were to ask, Nick, what's the secret sauce to business success or success in anything really, including making money? It's, and I know how, pardon my language, but it sounds really fucking corny, but it's doing something you love. And even when I go back to that tech company, Radian6, that was acquired, we were a social media monitoring company. And I was one of the first people with that company. And I remember the first couple of years, we were playing in social media. We were doing social media analytics. This was like even before social media got big in any way. And we were doing overtime and we had beer. And it was just like, it was such a fun, dynamic atmosphere that it just didn't feel like a job.
Wow. Yeah, I think that makes sense because really, when it comes down to it, your job, there's an exchange. There's an exchange of value, really. And so if you're focused on the money itself, then you're not exchanging value. When you're focused on just giving the value, then the money comes, right?
And even if you're making lots of money doing something you don't like, is that really the life that you want to live? Do you really want to spend 40 hours a week making $1 million a year, being miserable, sitting at a desk, doing something you don't want to be doing?
No. I think that's the thing, is that after time, eventually that catches up with you, either in your health or in your relationships or whatever. If you're doing things and you're not enjoying your life, then yeah, what is the point, right?
Absolutely.
So now we talk about, I've said practice makes perfect, but now I say practice makes progress, because I think it is about the journey. And I'm wondering, what do you do to get good at what you do?
Yeah. And again, the answer comes back to the same thing, which is just following the path of highest excitement, right? So in any given moment, of all of the things that are available to me, what's the most exciting thing? Sometimes the most exciting thing is to go take a nap. Sometimes it might be to go work on a book. Sometimes it might be a new podcast idea. Sometimes it might be to go have a water fight with the kids, right? So I think, or I don't think, I know, I work with a lot of facilitators. I've got over 200 people that's gone through my facilitator training in over 25 countries. And one of the biggest blocks that I see coaches have when it comes to client attraction is they're putting way too much focus on their business. And I'm not just talking about like physical effort, like doing things on their laptop, but like mental, constant churning of like, how do I get clients? 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 And if you understand the energetics of reality, when you're focusing on the absence of clients, you're creating more momentum to that experience, right? So one of the first things that I tell people, or one of the first things that I ask somebody who's struggling in their coaching practice to gain clients is, how much time do you spend on your business? And they might say, 3 or 4 hours a day. Okay, but how much time are you thinking about your business? And then the answer is usually pretty much like most of their waking state, right? So for me, I understand that for my success, which always starts with that connection, that inner guidance, that intuition, it comes with balance. And for me, balance is exercise. It's drinking my magnesium calm drink at bedtime every night, because I know that that's the one thing that shuts my brain off so I get a good sleep. It's nature, hiking, laying on the beach here in the front yard, getting out in the trees. I know those are the things that get me out of my head, into my body in a relaxed state. And it's from that relaxed state that all of my best ideas come from. I have an episode on my podcast, episode 6, where we talk about the importance of slowing down. And sure, like that's another cliche thing. Oh, everybody needs to slow down. Everybody's trying to go too quick. But most people aren't slowing down because even though intellectually it makes sense, they don't understand from a practical vantage point how that's really going to serve them. And the importance of slowing down is that when you slow down, get out of your head, into your body, that's when you're in this receptive mode where you can receive those inner nudges from your inner being. It's when you can receive those ideas for the books. It's the ideas that come through for your opt-ins, right? Wow. And a lot of people don't really understand that. I've got 2 paperbacks out on Amazon, and I think the first book, I wrote the first draft in 2 weeks. The second book, probably 3 to 4 weeks. And there was no effort in that. It just flowed, right? Because I'm not up in here, I'm connected down in here where most of us should be in art.
I love naps too. But it's funny that you mentioned, like, I've got some analogies with even playing music. So number one, slowing down. So when you're trying to learn something on guitar, going fast is not going to get you any further. You're just going to stumble more and more. So in order to learn it, you got to slow it right down. But then the other thing too, and if anybody's ever tried to learn an instrument before, it's almost like the more you practice, the worse you get. Right? You're trying, and you might almost get it the first time, and then it gets worse and worse and worse. You keep on going at it, but then it's no longer fun anymore. And the funny thing about it is that if you take a step back, you go away, you do something else, you come back, boom, it's right there.
And my guess is when you come back to it, so like before you go take your break, you're going fast, you're trying hard, you're probably in your head about it a lot. When you go take a nap and come back, you're grounded again, you're out of your head, you're coming back with that different energy.
Yep. And then you just play it. It just happens. And I know that a lot of business stuff works the same way, especially when you're overthinking things that is not fun, right? You're bringing that energy to it, right? Whereas I would imagine that if you spent your time thinking about or visualizing an awesome business or an awesome sales transaction or an awesome speech or whatever it is that makes you smile when you're doing it, that would probably be productive work, I would think, thinking about your business, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. A lot of what I teach is that this connection that we've been talking about, this inner guidance, where that really comes from and what unlocks that and fuels that is basically how you feel. So the happier you feel, the better you feel, the stronger that connection becomes, and the more attuned you are to that guidance. And when I go all the way back to the story that I told at the start, where I was sitting in that cubicle and had that feeling that life is supposed to be easier than this, well, the first place in that journey where I went wasn't, how do I make money show up? How do I do this? How do I do that? It was, how can I feel good? And it was me seeking out feeling good so I can feel good through life that led me down this incredible rabbit hole, opening up spirituality and all these great personal development teachers that eventually led to the money and the dream relationship and the place on the beach and the amazing coaching practice. But again, if I had to go all the way down to the bottom of it all and find that root seed, it all started when I focused on feeling good.
Yeah. And I think that kind of answers the question of like what we talked about earlier about, spending too much time in your business versus not spending enough time versus taking too many naps. I think that if you're doing something that fills you up, that makes you feel good, well, then you're never gonna have to worry about not spending enough time in your business, right? Because you like it.
If you know you're in the right business, it's because your business doesn't feel like it's a business.
Which I think probably opens up another can of worms where we're basically trained and programmed to think that work is supposed to be hard. And so when we're actually having fun in our business, we're feeling like we're doing it wrong somehow, right?
Totally.
So now it's time for your guest solo. So tell me what's exciting in your business.
I mean, for me, what's exciting seems to change month after month. Right now, I think the most exciting thing is a podcast that I launched in April. We're getting tons of downloads, tons of views. People are loving it. And what I love about this podcast is, the typical podcast format is the host bringing on a guest and kind of interviewing a guest. I'm doing what I kind of called a reverse podcast. and it's called Change Your Reality. And what I do is audience members, listeners come in on the show and they tell me, they share where they want to have a breakthrough in their life. And we spend 30 minutes, 35 minutes facilitating a breakthrough for them. So audience members can now watch and see, what a real mindset shift looks like and how easily people can shift these things that are holding them back.
Wow, that sounds amazing. So you're doing live coaching calls.
Basically, yeah. I mean, I don't like calling them coaching calls because there's so much depth to them.
Yeah.
But they're really, it's fun for me. It's fun for the audience member. And then I get these updates from them 2 weeks ago telling me how much their life has changed. And it's incredible. And to think that just 30 minutes. So I got an update from somebody this morning. I wish I had it in front of me here. But in 30 minutes, she was talking to her parents she hadn't spoken to in 4 years. Her fears around her ex-husband that she's had for years and years and years were now gone. She listed off this list of legit life-changing things that were now different just from a 30-minute conversation with me 2 weeks ago.
Wow. So how do you, number one, how do I find out more about this podcast? But also, is it possible for anyone to be a guest on this podcast and get a breakthrough?
You just go to the website. I've got this beautiful new website. I've got the best web developer. The website is nickbreau.com, nickbreau.com. And right on that page, you'll see Change Your Reality. There's a link there to apply to be a guest on the show. I do guest recordings once every couple of months. I do a whole bunch in a week. So just fill out that form if you're interested, and or go to the website and check out all of the beautiful resources and previous episodes.
Awesome. And thank you for that shout out. I did help build that. Just in case you're wondering why you said it that way. Well, thank you so much for rocking out with me today, Nick. This has been a lot of fun.
Absolutely.
To the listeners, make sure you subscribe, rate, and comment. We'll see you next time on the Work at Home Rockstar Podcast.